Greetings, Fire Chargers, Darkblade here, and I have recently decided to pick up Old English. I also changed my mind about Duolingo and cancelled my account deletion. Anyway, to commemorate me picking up this new Old English language, I've decided to go through this article on Japanese sequential voicing on Tofugu with you. The author is Kristen Dexter, and the illustrators for the graphics you see will see throughout this article are I have Francisco and Winnie Liu. Now with this device I have to be very careful with the case, because if I play with the case too much, even if I have it behind the device, it'll turn the device off and cut off the screen recorder. So I won't play with the case. So anyway, Rendaku, also known as sequential voicing in English, is an aspect of the Japanese language you've almost certainly come across, no matter what your level of Japanese. By the way, please stay for the whole video. Have you ever heard any of these words? Hitobito, tegami, hanabi, hiragana. If so, you've already seen the Rendaku in action. The Rendaku happens when two or more words join together to form one word, and the initial consonant of the second word becomes voiced. In written form, it gets the little Dakuten mark. That's Rendaku. Perhaps you asked your Japanese teacher why this thing is hitobito, and not hito. And maybe you asked why hanhan doesn't change to hanban. To these questions, you probably received a sign one of the following answers. Random, you just have to memorize them, yet another unsatisfactory response. But it doesn't have to be this way. The author wants to assure us there are rules and patterns and theories, lots of them. Trouble is, none of them do a great job of showing the whole picture. Some of that nations that the Tofuku people were able to disprove by themselves with very little effort. And by combining and by combing through them all, the Tofuku people were able to put together this guide, a guide that makes sense. And if we read their guide, we'll be able to predict or at least understand why certain words receive this sequential voicing most of the time. Like, even if you're just a beginner, you'll be able to just have a surprising amount of it. Prerequisites: I can already read hiragana and katakana, so it's really, so we'll scroll through this. And we'll skip over the podcast tab. Voicing. This section. All languages make use of voiced and unvoiced sounds. When you make a voiced sound, the vocal cords in your larynx vibrate. But when you make an unvoiced sound, they don't. Although this seems simple, they recommend that we read more about voicing in their Japanese pronunciation guide before they do it. While all English and Japanese vowels are voiced technically, consonants can be either voiced or voiceless. Kaki, kiko, and sashi are unvoiced consonants ks with voiced vowels a, I, U, E, O attached to them. By the way, whenever I say the names of Roman letters, I will read them by what English speakers commonly think of as the letter names. That applies when I'm talking about Roman letters. For example, even if I'm talking about the Latin, I will still refer to letter names with their English names. So it's still going. So if I'm saying letter names when talking about Latin, I'll still say A, E, I, O, U, not I, A, E, O, U, A, E, O, U. And then Mami and Ra are voiced consonants. Keep in mind that these MR are sonorants, which are almost always voiced. There aren't that many examples of voiceless sonorants out there. I think if they wanted a better example, they should have used obstruents. In most cases, there is no way to tell if a consonant is voiced or unvoiced unless you look it up or make the sound yourself to check if your throat vibrates. However, there are 4 sets of counting characters specifically marked for their voicing. They're all marked with this little symbol that you can see here. This is how it works. Take one of the 4 special voiceless consonants, KSTH, and add Zakutan to create new voices. New voice. So K becomes K. G, kakikiko to ka to gagigugego, S to Z, sashi suseso, zaji zuzezo. By the way, the reason why this is G and not Z is because of a palatalization change that happened centuries ago. Same thing that changed means C to she. Originally, this also happened to se and ze, changing them to she and je, but that was later depalatalized, according to the Lingo Lizard video. Next is T to T. Ta, chi, tsu, te, to. Yes, yes, T and D were also palatalized to da, ji, zu, de, do, and H to P. Ha, hi, hu, he, ho, to babi, bu, be, bo. There's also an extra pair that can turn to an additional unvoiced set. Ha, hi, hu, he, ho, to pa, pi, pu, pe, po. While the P sound isn't voiced in Japanese, it's considered somewhere between voiced and unvoiced. Technically, it's an voiceless bilabial plosive. The little round circle is called the Handakuten. Ten and Handak, they tell us that these symbols are extremely important when it comes to understanding sequential voicing. Before we go further, there's one more thing that we need to know. Compound words. I don't understand why they use this example because the result is not and never has been a real English compound word. But there are real ones in this table. A compound word is a word made of 2 or more words. I think to use this compound number is a bit of a stretch. As are some more of these, the ones with the hyphens. Both words can exist on their own separately, but when they come together, they create a new unique word. The compound word they create can serve almost any function, noun, adjective, verb, etc. The same is true for Japanese. Gin, gyo, gingyo, bijin, bijin. By the way, in Chinese, this is Jinyu and Meiyan. Meiyan. I don't know if I got the tones right. It's been a long time since I've last seen Hirune. Hirune. I don't know what these are called in Chinese. Tobu. And this is Komu. Dobi Komu. So, if you have a verb that's the first element of a compound word in Japanese, the first element is changed from what is it called? Its dictionary form into its stem form. So with ichidan verbs, that's just clips off the ru, and with godan verbs, it's changing the u, the final u, to an e sound. And this is shiju ni, and yes, I know that says yonju ni. The supplied Ruby says that. Again, I still think that using these compound numbers as an example of compound words is a bit of a stretch. Next is fuku daitorio. Japanese words are pretty obvious. That may only seem that way because we're studying Japanese so closely. But what is this sequential voicing? It's when 2 or more words come together to form the compound, and the first consonant in the second word becomes voiced. linguistics, this is called sequential voicing. Let's begin with this last example. Hito plus hito equals hitobito. The first consonant H in the second word hito becomes voiced hi to be becoming hitobito. Here's another example. Te kami becomes tegami. The k and kami becomes voiced. So here are the things that you need to have in order for this sequential voicing to happen. 1. Two words come together to form a compound word. The first consonant of the second word before its combination is unvoiced. The first consonant of the second word is specifically one of the 4 sets of consonants that can undergo this change, so as to be from the K row, the S row, the T row, or the H row. Surrounding the first consonant of the second word are voiced vowels and sometimes nasals, which basically means that the first element that comes before the second element has to end in a vowel or N, because as a vowel coming after the initial consonant of the second element is a given, because this Japanese syllable structure almost never allows syllables to end in consonants. And it outright never allows consonant clusters. Anyway, word of caution, just because the conditions are right doesn't mean that it is going to happen. Next is the BRP sound. If the first word ends in tsu or n, the H consonant will usually rendaku to P, the article claims. Everything else defaults to B. For example, this is sutsu and hatsu becomes supatsu. This is not sequential voicing. What happens here is that the final syllable of the first element has assimilated into the initial phoneme of the second consonant. It just so happens that when an H is involved in this assimilation, it becomes a P sound. Anyway, this is this kind of assimilation. It's kind of like how you say ichi plus sai. For 1 year old, you get isai and not ichisai. You shouldn't. That's the kind of assimilation that's happening here. This is not sequential voicing. And comes enpitsu. Okay, I think that this example's a bit better, but still, technically this is not sequential voicing, as p is not a voiced phoneme. General rules, okay? Warning, while they call this rules, they are more like guidelines. So the sequential voicing does happen in native words. It doesn't happen in Congo. It doesn't happen in foreign loans. And if the second word in the compound has a voiced consonant or a P sound anywhere in it, that blocks the rendaku from happening. If the voicing in the first word is close to the second word, rendaku may not occur. Words that come together to mean X and Y, it doesn't happen. Repeating onomatopoeia do not, and certain prefixes and suffixes also block it. Before we go, each one of these rules one by one, let's talk about a quick lesson of Japanese's 3 word categories. These are native words, Kongo, which means borrowed from Chinese, and Gaidaigo, foreign loan words. So as you can see, there's China, which is Kongo. There's Japan, which is labeled as Wago, and the rest of the world is Gaidaigo. though the Netherlands and Portugal are exceptions. It's probably just because of how long they've also been interacting with Japan with respect to the rest of the world ever since the mid-16th century. And now, also known as Sequential, covers all the words inherited from Old Japanese. They weren't borrowed, adopted, or introduced from any language. They're real Japanese through and through. Then there are the words introduced from Chinese and adapted to fit certain. And then there's the foreign word from country. Gaidaigo are words borrowed from places other than China. Nowadays, most of these exist as katakana loanwords, but the Dutch and Portuguese had a strong influence in the Edo period before loans were being katakanized. These are trickier to spot and usually occur. I wonder, would super old loanwords from Sanskrit also be part of this exceptions category? Now, this one, Japanese sort of origin words do Ranzaki. That's important. This article is going to start with Fago, the words native to Japan. I wonder, which one of these three categories would loans from the Ryukyuan languages and Ainu be? Because Ainu is technically its own independent language that has no genetic relationship to Japanese or anything else for that matter. While the Ryukyuan languages spoken in the Ryukyu Islands are related to Japanese, they're still their own independent languages. Now, one thing to know about these words is that, barring a few exceptions, they almost never start with a Zakuten or Hanzakuten voice consonant. G, Z, B, D, P, they don't really start with voice consonants, period. So not even R or the J sound. And there are a couple of exceptions, but all of them are the result of some sort of sound change. And this means that this is their theory. They theorized it was probably a natural, unintentional way to distinguish compound words from just saying a word twice, comparing two words, or listing things. I don't know if there is any real circumstance where you would compare two words. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. Words like hitobito makes it clear that you aren't saying hito, a person, another person, and everyone knows that bito isn't a word because real words don't start with B. Let's look at a few examples. Kusahana becomes kusabana, flowering plant. Sabana indicates that you aren't talking about grass and flowers, and bana isn't a word on its own. Aosora lets you know that this is a compound in which blue is modifying sky. By the way, Old Japanese did not allow this thing you see where it's just where a word has just one vowel touching another vowel. That was not allowed in the earliest stages of the Japanese language. A word could have a vowel without a consonant, but only if that syllable was the very first syllable of the word. All subsequent syllables within a word would need to have a consonant and then a vowel. So what was this originally in Old Japanese? It was a wo. It was originally a W sound between A and O. And again, this is extraneous, so ignore that. Looking at their list of ideal conditions, we can see that Japanese words are the perfect catalyst. Two words come together to form a compound word. The first consonant of the second word is voiced and is one of the ones that is voiceless and is one of the ones that can become voiced and are surrounded by these voiced phonemes, the vowels. Almost all Wago words start with unvoiced consonants. There are some exceptions. There are some that start with vowels, and there are even fewer that start with voiced consonants. Again, that's always due to sound changes. No vowels are voiced. That means if the second word in the compound starts with K, S, T, or H, the conditions for this are perfect. Take a look at the following stuff to make sure that confirming that 1 through 4 on the above left line. K to G in Hirakana, S to Z in Yamazakura, T to D in Hanaji, H to B in Hanabi, and H to P in Teppa. This isn't assimilation, but I also wouldn't call it sequential voicing, and also an extra more. And if you just want this plus this, you would get one more plus one more, add them together, and now the resulting word is 3 more law. The Japanese language is happily written talking like this until about the 4th century. Those of you who read up on your Onyomi and Kunyomi history already know what's coming, but for the rest of you, this is when China shows up on the scene. By the way, this would be still very early on into the history of the Japanese language, because the Old Japanese period is goes up to the 8th century AD. Chinese origin words normally don't do this. Unlike Wago, Chinese words can and do start with voiced consonants. Because this applying rendaku would cause unvoiced consonants to sound like other voiced consonants, which could result in confusion. For example, in the word nyugakushiken, which means school entrance examination, you would not render it to mean nyugakujiken. If you did, it might be confusing because jiken means incident, as in, I'm not gonna read that. Similarly, the saka in Hososaka, which means broadcast writer, wouldn't have rendaku applied to it due to the saka. If it did, we'd get zaka, which sounds like the word for miscellaneous. You're probably starting to understand why Chinese Congo words don't rendaku. There's too much ambiguity, at least when compared to Wago words. These compound words made up of 2 or more odd meanings are called jukugo, and are only a small percentage of them do this. The power of these Congo words are so strong that they even have the habit of stopping rendaku from happening, even when they're in a compound with the normal Japanese. The native Japanese words in Congo plus Wago words, where the first element uses the onyomi reading and the second element uses the kunyomi reading, rendaku can be blocked. Even if all the other words conditions for rendaku exist, the Congo words will stop it from happening. So not only do Chinese loans not undergo this sequential voicing if they are in a compound, but if they're also in a compound, they can also block the other element of the compound from receiving sequential voicing. And they give us an example. Umehoshi becomes umeboshi. Both of these are native words that use the kunyomi reading. But futanhoshi becomes futanhoshi, which means triangle futon. Futon, however, is a Kongo word that uses the onyomi readings. So it blocks the sequential voicing from happening. Kawasoku becomes kawazoku. Shinsoku is just still shinsoku. Okusoku is, soko. Soko is a Lago word, and it does Senzaku compound with another native word, but it doesn't when paired with Chinese words. This word, da, is another example of a Kongo word that stops Senzaku completely. For example, daisuki, the Chinese word, blocks the sequential voicing. However, in native compounds, you do see this skew. This word undergo, for example, sukizuki, hanashizuki, and sakizuki. And then you have daikirai again. Inukirai means dog hater, nekokirai means cat hater, and onakirai means misogyny. So again, it's not that these words native words wouldn't normally undergo sequential voicing, but the Chinese elements being part of the compound prevents them from doing it. That doesn't mean all compound words are undaku. Daku also occurs in compound words, especially if the second element is vulgarized. Hence, vulgarization in the linguistic sense simply means to make a word common. Because it's part of the general language, it's treated like a native word. For example, fufu kenka becomes fufu genka. An example, I think the numbers would also be an example of what's it called, vulgarization. For example, when you say 300, it's becomes sanbyaku. It doesn't just stay sanhyaku. So either the word for 3, the word for 1,000, or both have vulgarized. Another example is sanzen, which means 3,000. It does undergo this sequential voicing and doesn't just stay as san-sen. As the other numbers do just take hyaku and sen, though some of them assimilate. Other examples are kyodai genka, and it's still a t. Oh wait, these are just. In the next two sentences, we'll see Lago plus Congo compounds because of how common or vulgarized the Congo word is. It's treated as though it's allowing it to attack you. This is kabushiki gaisha, which means public corporation. Ao jashin, which means blueprint. In the next three examples, we'll see a Congo plus Wago combination. Since these Congo are vulgarized, they don't prevent vulgarizations. This is no plus saki will become no saki. Wait, isn't the onyomi pronunciation of this character ya? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen it in yasai, which means vegetable. And I think I've also seen it as ye in Chinese. Next is Hinan. han plus hasigo becomes hinan basigo. And by the way, this go and hasigo is itself an example of sequential voicing because this element by itself would be ko but becomes go because of sequential voicing. Next is za futon, zabuton. Oh, maybe other examples of vulgarization may not be as obvious itself. For example, Chugoku means China, does have sequential voicing, but Hankoku, Korea, does not. And here's some theory of why this is. Now, foreign loans don't do this. Gaidaigo foreign words from everywhere but China are generally written with katakana. And katakana words almost never end document. For example, ice coffee. Dang, that was hard. You wouldn't change kohi to gohi because the word shouting is iced coffee, not iced coffee. Well, apparently it's just iced coffee, not iced coffee. Dang it, now they're making me do that coffee. Anyway, I'm 31 minutes in and only halfway through the article. That's probably bad. The same goes for katakana words that combine with native words to form compounds. Meikani game and kesu does not to sequential voicings, and neither does as namahamu. Most Congo katakana loanwords are Western words. Gaidaigo still refers to any and all loanwords that aren't from China. Most non-katakana Gaidaigo comes from Portuguese or Dutch. Unfortunately, because they've been in the language for so long, they can, sometimes hundreds of years, they can ranzaku too. That are pretty rare, but let's take a look at the most common ones. Ama plus kappa means amagappa. Kappa is a little more derived from the Portuguese word capa, meaning coat. This word has been vulgarized and become a general use form, so it does ranzaku. Anyway, there have been some Sanskrit loans that have been in the language for even longer. Probably spot 1,000 years older than these Dutch and Portuguese loans. Would they be considered vulgarized? Next are Iroha Karuto, Iroha Garuta. Iroha is the term for the oldest Japanese syllabary, like Ayueo or and Karuta is a loanword derived from the Portuguese carta, meaning card, but it's been vulgarized into general use, so it has sequential voicing. Note that unlike blocking ranzaku like Congo does, Gaidaigo plus Ago can cause ranzaku just like a normal word. Just because the Gaidaigo itself doesn't mean that it prevents normal native words from doing. For example, bidama. Not B and bida is short for bidoro. No, the Portuguese vidro, meaning glass. And this is sukukutsu. Sukukutsu. That word is a bit hard. I mean, zukukutsu. Anyway, that word is still a bit hard for me to say. Zuku is the loan word from the Dutch dijk, meaning canvas or cloth. Canvas shoes. No idea what that means. Hatokata. Hatogata. Need for Endaku even exists in more modern Western compounds as well. Borudogami means cardboard paper. Now that you know where these words come from and how they affect each other, it's time to talk about the other way to predict whether a word gets Endaku treatment other than just etymology. Next one is Simon's Law, which says that sequential voicing doesn't happen if the second element of the compound word already has a voiced obstruent anywhere in it. An obstruent is a voiced consonant or handakuan consonant. Well, actually, an obstruent is a sound that is caused by the obstruction of the airflow. There are three types of obstruents. There are plosives like p, t, k, b, d, g. There are fricatives like f, v, s, and z, and sh. And there are also affricates. X. That means Handaku won't occur if the sound already has a voiced consonant or Handaku, is it? Well, Handaku aren't voiced, i.e. it doesn't start with G, E, Z, D, B, or P. It's examples hito hito, doki doki, and yamakaji. Yamakaji. Distant word kaji does have a voiced consonant, so it doesn't Handaku. Kamikuzu stays as kamikuzu because the Z in the second element blocks it from having sequential voicing. Harukaze is harukaze. Otokage becomes otokage. Theories have popped up over why this is the case. Yes, but the most common among them is that it's just plain hard to pronounce certain sounds together. And here are some other theories about why. And this. And now here is the reverse. There is one exception to Lyman's law that they're saying is very rare, but also they claim to be very interesting. In some compounds, when the second word's consonant is where its second consonant is voiced, it becomes voiceless and can even switch its voicing so that the first consonant said. Most of the words this applies to are from classical Japanese, so there's nowhere you need to worry about them. But a few are fairly common. So there's ta Suzumi becomes ta Zutsumi. That's hard to say. So in the second element, the first and second consonants have like traded voice statuses. The same happens to Hara Suzumi becomes Hara Zutsumi. This is still a bit hard to say. Ato Shizari becomes Ato Shisari. Now, this is lexical complication. If the first element contains a voiced obstruent that's too close in position to the second consonant, like in the last syllable, then that might prevent sequential voicing. Akadama becomes akadama. Hyakuen dama. Hyakuen dama. Ma Magatama remains as Magatama because there is a voiced option right next to where the second word element is. Mizutama becomes polka dot. I think that's a weird etymology for polka dot. Now, because I'm already 40 minutes in, I will save the rest of this for like a second part. Goodbye, Fire Chargers. Make sure to like and subscribe.